Outside of Central Asia, one of the biggest problems for Putin's goals were the old Soviet-era pipeline networks that took Russia's hydrocarbon resources to market in Europe. The Brotherhood network through Ukraine and the Northern Lights network through Belarus. Belarus remained an effective puppet state of the Kremlin, and so the Northern Lights network wasn't very troubling. But Ukraine was very different. As late as 2005, 80% of Russia's oil and gas exports to Europe were still all concentrated through the Brotherhood network across Ukraine, because that network simply had the highest capacity at the time. None of this mattered when Ukraine and Russia were all part of the same country, but now that they weren't, it mattered a ton. And it began mattering even more after 2005, following Ukraine's Orange Revolution and the rise to power of the pro-Western Viktor Yushchenko as president. Russia demanded that Ukraine transfer the ownership over the entire Brotherhood pipeline network to them, which was staunchly refused by Yushchenko's new pro-Western government. At the same time, Ukraine still relied on Russian natural gas imports for most of their own consumption as well. And twice during the winters of 2006 and 2009, Russia strategically penalized Ukraine and applied political pressure by temporarily cutting off their gas supplies exactly when they needed them the most. And in both instances, Moscow accused the Ukrainians of siphoning off gas traveling through the pipes that was intended for Europe. In the eyes of Moscow, Ukraine was becoming an unreliable bridge for their pipelines to Europe, and alternative routes began to be constructed, like Yamal through Belarus and Poland, Turk Stream and Blue Stream beneath the Black Sea directly to Turkey, and most controversially of all, Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2 at the costs of $10 and $11 billion each respectively, beneath the Baltic Sea, feeding directly to Germany, Russia's single largest oil and gas customer, and Germany was only increasing their dependence. In 2011, after a tsunami struck the Fukushima nuclear power plant in Japan and sparked the world's biggest nuclear disaster since Chernobyl, the German government took the decision to gradually phase out all 17 of their own nuclear reactors that, in 2011, produced a quarter of Germany's entire electricity. The final 3 were theoretically scheduled to come offline at the end of 2022, and to make up the difference, Germany began importing even more gas from Russia, increasing the value of Moscow's leverage over them. By 2010, the Ukrainian president was no longer the pro-Western Viktor Yushchenko, but the pro-Russian Viktor Yanukovych. And this was important, because huge discoveries were just being made at the time by various energy companies that suddenly showed Ukraine had proven natural gas reserves of 1.1 trillion cubic meters, and they could potentially be as high as 5.4 trillion cubic meters. Largely focused in rich geological deposits around offshore Crimea, the Sea of Azov, the Western Carpathians, and the Dnieper-Donetsk Rift in the northeast, where more than 80% of those 1.1 trillion cubic meters worth of proven reserves were located. These discoveries in the early 2010s suddenly revealed that Ukraine held the second largest known proven reserves of natural gas in Europe, only behind Norway's 1.53 trillion cubic meters. Through a long series of gas pipelines stretching across the North Sea to Europe, Norway has used those reserves to become the second largest exporter of gas to Europe, only after Russia, and provides roughly 19% of the EU's total supply. So, Ukraine, with potentially as much as 3.5 times more natural gas than Norway, and with one of the world's largest pipeline networks from the Soviet era already built out across the country directly towards Europe, could have easily all of a sudden become an enormous provider of natural gas to Europe and cut tens, if not hundreds of billions of dollars into Russia's biggest market. Moreover, Ukraine's gas infrastructure also includes storage sites capable of holding more than 31 billion cubic meters worth of gas, and they have been severely underutilized for decades. The entire European Union can currently only store 100 billion cubic meters, and thus, if Ukraine were to ever join the EU, they would increase their gas storage capabilities by a third.